Hi there, and welcome to Talks on Tuesday, where we meet every week to discuss a variety of metaphysical issues. And today is my turn. So I get to choose. And looking at what's going on around us and the conversations I'm hearing and reflecting on my own thoughts, I decided to look at how we can humanize people we've kind of identified as the enemy in our daily life, whether it's in politics or religion or finance, cultures, whatever it is. I think a big part of the problems we face on both sides is that we sometimes stop looking at each other as if we're part of humanity. And I'm trying to wrap my head about how to keep from slipping into that mindset, as I so often do, especially when I use the word they. Well, they seem to think, or, well, they're the ones who, or whatever. So I thought I would just throw that out to you today and see if you've got any ideas for what we can do to reach our hands out and call each other brother, sister, cousin, aunt, friend.
I can just say a few words. I think the main solution, and I know you've all heard this before, but I'll say it anyway, because it bears repeating 100 bazillion times, in my opinion, is that we all have to work with ourselves. And the more we do that, the more authentic we are, the more connective we are. And it isn't like a lot of work to interact with people that may not hold some of the same ideas about life as we do. And I think it's quite easy to connect with people. I would not call them our enemy at all. I would see them as my brother and sister. And I think there's so many different kinds of realities and different people on the planet, and we've all been affected by, culture, traditions, poor education, so many different things. And that dictates kind of how we are and what we believe. And then we find our tribe, so to speak, and then we're all like them. And, it's hard for us to step out of that. And that goes for so-called conservatives and so-called liberals. Um, so it's not about any of that. It's about, first of all, work on ourselves. That's huge. What a difference it makes. And I can attest to that just being out when I go out, and I'm not a saint. I'm not always that way. I have things happening in my life sometimes that set me back and I have to regroup for a while. So then if I go out for a little while, I may not be that energizing beacon that people are going to love or anything. But, that's it. I mean, all the other things, you can improve everything else, but I think the main thing is look at who we are and look at who they are. They are the same as we are. They simply have different ideas and beliefs, and they think that that's who they are, and they aren't, right? So we can see that beauty underneath all that when we look at them. And if when we connect with them, we see who they are. We see that they are just like us in reality. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Gino. Yeah. And it's true. I mean, we believe this. Um, and yet sometimes in the moment, at least for myself, I snap into, well, that's stupid. How can they do that? That's cruel. That's, I become so judgy um, of others and not recognizing that they come from a certain context, just as I do.
Mhm.
Um, and one thing I find really helpful is this idea that we hear in the reconnection and other places is that we are all part of a hologram. Everyone is a reflection of everybody else with all of our beauty and our perceived ugliness. It's hard to remember though. I need to write it down and put it on stickies all over the place.
Yeah, that's part of it, Mary, is that remembering. I find that, and I loved what you said. Your share was so lovely. Thank you. A great way to start off. And I agree with you. I find for me, it's easier to remember when I do more meditation or, just kind of find the stillness within. And, but, like you mentioned, Gina, we're all human and we have our moments and things happen. And, we look at somebody and feel, whatever. And again, just finding that self-forgiveness helps me slip back into the acceptance that we are all okay. I find that when we don't judge ourselves as harshly also, it's a step towards remembering that we're all one and that just that grace, that kindness. I saw a comment the other day I thought was so beautiful. In a world where you can be anything, be kind or something to that degree. And it was like, oh yes, choose kindness. Yeah, I like that. So
Yeah. And that reminds me that so much of what people do that we perceive as negative comes from a place of pain and fear. Um, and as I forget who said it, we're all just walking each other home, or should be. Yeah. Yeah, Renee.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
perfectly.
Okay, great. So one thing that I learned when I was attending meetings for families of alcoholism, Al-Anon, uh, I remember hearing this said very frequently, how can you punish someone whose remorse is so much greater than their misdeeds? And honestly, if you are someone who has ever had the opportunity or the occasion to perhaps live with someone who is suffering from alcoholism or drug addiction, honestly, some of the things that they do are unbelievable, even to them,
Yeah.
more to them than to anybody else. And sometimes you are in such utter amazement at what just happened that the first thing that you want to do is to critique and criticize and, be superior to everything that you've just seen unfold, especially if it's your own parent. And that was probably the hardest life lesson for me to learn, was that I had to understand that someone was suffering from an illness, chemical dependence, and sometimes they did things that were unfathomable and sometimes even unforgivable. But nonetheless, they were under the influence of something which made them take these actions. And you can't even say they weren't accountable or responsible. You can't stand there in judgment and say anything like that, because oftentimes they were so unconscious of what they were doing that it's really hard to sort of cast blame on what the action was. And what I learned, probably more importantly, was that I have to see the action and not the person. I have to make that distinction. I have to sort of divide myself from the perspective that what they've done is who they are, because that's not the correct way to perceive it. And it's not accurate. And it's also not fair. So I just sort of put that out there because I've read many biographies from people who are suffering from drug addiction and who have committed acts of, heinous crimes, etc., while under the influence. And if you could ever know what is in their hearts, how broken their hearts are for taking these actions, none of us could ever know or understand that. So there's one example in my own city. There was a young man who, under the influence of alcohol, killed 4 people while he was driving drunk. And, he went to jail for X number of months, etc. And I don't think he's been released yet, but that one moment cost him his life in ways that he, and privileges that he always was, able to enjoy. That was all completely taken away from him in one blink of an eye. And he had to go to jail to, you know, that was the way that we punish someone. So anyway, I'll sort of keep it open and look forward to what anybody else has to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Renee. It's so true. If I happen to hurt somebody's feelings accidentally, and I feel so bad for it, just imagine what it's like to do something really substantive to someone else or be responsible for something like that. You can't even begin to imagine. Yeah. Yeah, Barb.
And being on the other side of that, being, say, the parent or spouse of the person who was killed, um, and finding it in your heart to offer grace to the person who conducted that act. And I think of an example of a woman who I met through reconnective healing, and her son was killed, and she was at such peace with that. And it's not like, oh, it was okay, she was glad it happened, of course not, but she found a way to navigate that situation and not totally lose who she was, and not lose her understanding of the world because that happened. And I find that so admirable, and she's such an inspiration, I think, that it's just, even though something that's so horrific happened, she was able to maintain her own sense of peace within, which is huge. So anyway.
Yeah, and it's hard to forgive, but the forgiveness is its own gift. It is such a release from pain to just say, I forgive you. It's over. It's a miracle in a way. Yeah, I just lost a young relative to alcohol related, just the breakdown of his poor body, and not understanding what drove him. I could never understand what drove him, but I need to forgive him for the sorrow that his actions, which he could not control, brought to the family. And this happens all the time. And if we look at it in a more universal sense, whoever brings us pain, whether we think they're wrong or cruel or whatever, we just have to remember that I think all of us are just trying to get through the day. It's hard, or it can be. Just need a shift in perception, I guess.
Yeah.
I just want to introduce a tiny bit of levity.
Oh,
And,
please.
Oh, okay, a huge amount. Ready? Everybody clap and laugh after I say this, please. Um, uh, I think it was you, Mary, that mentioned judgment. And lots of times people will be really down on themselves when they judge. But we all know, too, that judgment is also a tool to assist us sometimes in a positive way. But when I was not in one of my greatest moods, I was going to this food co-op not too far from where I live, and I was about to make a turn on the street where it is, and they had it all blocked off, and they were pouring all this tar and everything all over the street, so you couldn't get to the co-op from that place. You had to go up a little bit further and take a right down this narrow alleyway and then get into the parking lot. So I get out of the car And I'm thinking, you know, we have a lot of other streets around here that are much worse than the street that they're doing tar on right now. Why don't they wake up and not do that? And I can smell all that tar. It's just coming into my lungs and everything. That can't be healthy. And then the whole parking lot is full of jacaranda trees. I'm so allergic to them. They're so pungent. They're everywhere. And I'm breathing in tar and jacaranda trees. And I rush into the grocery store. Yeah. And of course, when I got in the store, I'm thinking, you know, I said all those things, I thought all those things, and so it is, and it's temporary, so big deal. Let it go. So these things happen.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, for some reason, I'm remembering a time when I was teaching high school many, many years ago, and I had a group of students who would always dress in camouflage. They were kind of they were kind of the bad actors in the group. So I got all judgy, and I thought they're wearing camouflage. I'm going to mark them absent, and and they thought that was so stupid, but it made me laugh really hard. Like I can hear you, I just can't see you. I think sometimes when you decide to use some humor, maybe they'll laugh about it now. At the time, they thought it was just awful. But and,
It was funny, Mary, for
oh, that's
sure.
good. That's good to know.
The word forgiveness is such a big word, and I always call it the F word because it's so difficult. And not to get biblical, but doesn't it say in there like forgiveness is like 7 times 70 or something like that? And it's a really, really hard word. And some of my spiritual teachings, what they say about it is that it's more for yourself than it is for the other person. If they did something wrong, it's not like it's okay to do that wrong thing. But I know there's been a few places where it's been very difficult for me to forgive something, because you're justified in your feelings and your anger and everything that it brings up. But when you can and put that separation there, it is such a relief. It's such a weight off your shoulders. Um, and then the 7 times 70 thing, there's a couple of things where like years later there's something and I'm like, oh my God, I thought I took care of that. So I have to do inner reflection. And
Mhm.
so in case you're not familiar with some of those words, I wanted to share that. And I read a book. There's actually kind of a local author. Her name is Nassim Raka, and she lives in Silverton, Oregon. Does that name mean anything?
No.
She wrote a book. She came and spoke at the church that I was at. It was a Unity church, and I have a signed copy of her book,
Nice.
and it's called The Crying Tree. And it's actually about a murder. It's a fictional book, but essentially it's true. But it's about a murder, and it's about forgiveness.
Mhm.
And when I read that book and the story, and it's a great book just to read it. Um, it really opened me up more um, to that whole topic. It's been a while since I've read it, so I can't give you a bunch of details. And I actually wouldn't want you to just read it as a story and then back here know that essentially it's true. And I'm going to go grab my copy and show it to you. But if that's a topic that you're interested in or you find difficult or whatever, I really highly recommend it. It just gives you a whole new perspective and the freedom that it can give to you.
Yeah. And the one of the words you said that is, I think, as powerful a notion as forgiveness is separation. It's the separation that makes us think that we can condemn, because we think they are other. And they're not, but they are us. And it's so important for us right now, and probably it always has been. We've always been sort of at each other, but right now, they're not other. They are just us in a different context. Yeah, manifesting differently. Yeah, Chels, did you have something?
Yeah. I can't get over. I love what Billy just shared, but I can't get over the analogy you brought up, Mary, about people coming in wearing camouflage. And it really, you know, the whole world is a stage. And some of this enemy, non-enemy, difficult person is a pre-written script that people volunteer for, and we're all walking around in camouflage.
Yeah. And you know what? We're all friends backstage.
We are.
We're all part of the troupe.
We're more than friends.
Yeah.
Yes. We sign up for difficult parts and we play that role.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cecilia.
Yeah, hi. So I know I shared a story with you some time ago about when I was almost carjacked and anyways, and there was a shot fired in my direction. So it was really interesting. There's the crying tree. There you go. There you go. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. But in my experience, when this happened, um, the people involved were gang members and they were in gang member clothing and stuff. And so when it all turned around and they found them and they, took them to jail and stuff, I realized that I had a, a, a fear or a trigger or something whenever I would see people in gang clothes. And it was very, mm, it was something I could not ignore. So I just remembered I could be imprisoned by this because I'm going to avoid all these people in these who wear these clothes. Or I could see them as individuals and know them differently. And so whenever I would see people in the gang clothes, I would go up to them and I would say hello and how are you? And oh, isn't that a pretty outfit? Or isn't this a pretty, the way you've done whatever. I would make a comment and I would humanize them so I could feel comfortable with them in my life again because they're not other. And I didn't want to have to avoid this group of people for the rest of my life because of what they were wearing. And so that's something, a choice I made because I wanted to find the light in them again, in the group, in anybody. Doesn't matter what they're wearing. But I loved your camouflage story because I was in an elevator one time and there's somebody in the elevator with camouflage. And so when I went in and I stepped back towards them, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. It's like, but I had done that too because it was just so funny. It's like, you're camouflage, I can't see you. So, but yeah. But yeah, don't let that stop you from seeing the beauty in people. Is what I want to share.
Indeed.
Cecilia, what was the outcome of that interaction with the gang members? What did
Uh,
they say?
well, it's a big old story. It's a big, oh, they were smiling. They greeted me. It's like, oh, you see me. You see who I am. It's like going, oh, it was a surprise that I approached them even to say hello. It's like, oh, well, thank you. And they were very kind. So
Good.
that's what it was.
There you go.
Yeah, that's nice. I do that if I see a homeless person. I always make eye contact and smile or say hi or, acknowledge them. And yeah, I think that's important.
Is well, gosh, we seem to have reached a moment of happy silence. And maybe we should just sit in that for a minute. look at each other's faces and be so grateful for one another. Yes, Louis Therese.
I think that is such a beautiful thing that you've just said, to take a moment and look upon each other. You know, that is to become quiet. It is so powerful. And especially, as you say, look upon each other. We are friends, and more than that, we share deep things. And it was just wonderful for me that you said, look upon each other.
Thank you. Well, it's been lovely to see you all here today. I love you all. Be well and prosper. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
See you next time.
Bye bye.